Hello, this is Mike Ginnitti from Spotrac, breaking down Deshaun Watson's new historic $230 million extension with the Cleveland Browns, including a minimum salary in 2022 and a signing bonus of $44.9 million. I'm going to run through the numbers, then I'm going to run through some of my thoughts on the breakdown, and then I'm going to flip over to Google Sheets and kind of walk through the process of how the Browns may be able to handle this thing and manage this thing from a cap perspective and try to remain competitive even through the next iteration of what a contract could look like for Watson. So this is going to be kind of a projected, thought-out process year to year, basically through 2028 over the next couple of minutes here. But initially, the actual contract, fully guaranteed at signing, historic in basically every level. Not the biggest signing bonus we've seen, not the biggest cash flow we've seen, certainly not the biggest first-year cash, but fully locked in at signing, $230 million. That's far and away. I believe the current barometer before this was $101 million. Aaron Rodgers just a few days ago. So we're not even close to where we were 72 hours ago with fully guaranteed money at signing. Is this going to change everything? I don't know. I don't have that answer right now. The Mahomes contract didn't change much if we start to think about the next 5 quarterback contracts. Josh Allen came back down to earth, signed a 4-year extension, essentially a 6-year extension. That's really 4 years. Dak Prescott took the franchise tag route, tacked on 4 years, basically fully guaranteed on that deal. Kirk Cousins has been going short and sweet. Aaron Rodgers is now going short and sweet. The Mahomes contract kind of looks like it's standing out in left field right now. And if you look at the cash flow of that, you'll understand why they went big time years. But that won't be a situation where I think you'll have guys and agents lining up for 10-plus year contracts. There's no control in that. There's tons of money. There's tons of power. But you have to beg to get out of that. And you have to take the PR hit to demand the trade, similar to what Russell Wilson went through last year, even though he was just on a 5-year contract. So this is obviously more traditional. It's a Major League Baseball contract in that it is basically flat pay, $46 million every single year, including this year. You can see the cap structure here, and I'm going to dive into this cap structure quite a bit here in a few minutes, but there's no potential out. It's all guaranteed. The cap hit jumps to almost $55 million next year and stays there for the next 4 seasons. There's no bells and whistles here. The only actual bell and whistle is that in signing this contract, they dropped the salary to a minimum, which is going to affect his suspendable dollar amount, versus what it would have been on $35 million. And there's language in this contract, as you can read here, that means he will not forfeit any of this signing bonus, and none of the future guarantees, so the next 5 years, can be voided based on any kind of personal conduct suspension. Now, the language may specifically say for this incident only. I don't have the language in front of me, but from what I've read, it is a personal conduct rider that precludes him and excludes him from losing the guaranteed salary in this column here. And he won't be asked to pay back this for personal conduct reasons. Again, I don't know if it's lock and key with any personal conduct suspension or specifically just the one that he's going through in terms of litigation. But for now, it seems that financially he's fairly safe for at least $229.5 million worth. If he chops off $600,000 to $700,000 of this, at the most, if it's a 10-game suspension around there, there's not much being pulled out of this. That's for darn sure. It's a strong contract, whether you love it or hate it. It's a strong contract, obviously. But what does it do for the Browns going forward? Let's flip over to our Google Sheet. You'll see this is the original contract here. This is the same numbers you just saw on Spotrac.com. There's those base salaries. There's the proration. Here's the cap hits. And this is the column we're going to focus on here going forward. All right, so what do we do next year? You'll see I've actually added a couple of columns here. So this is the projected NFL salary cap. Here's the actual salary cap this year. Here's where we think things may be going based on some of the tea leaves I'm reading here. And then this column here specifically is the cap percent of Deshaun Watson based on the league cap. All right, and the reason we do that is Scott Allen and I here at Spotrac, we do a lot of work on this. We've done about 20 years worth of trend work on the impact of the quarterback cap hit versus the overall league cap, and just how high. What is the ceiling, generally speaking, for ultimate success with how big that cap hit can be? Because you can say the cap is fake, but when you enter a season and player X, maybe the most important player, of course, has a cap hit of X. If it's 40 million or not 20 million, obviously there's 20 million of cap that could have been used elsewhere on that roster. Now you can free up cap a million ways until you're blue in the face, as basically every team has shown this offseason, and rightfully so. But there are certain teams that roll into a season with a high cap hit on a quarterback, and maybe that's calculated. Maybe they understand that this is the year they want to take that on, versus it wasn't a big free agent year for them. But the numbers that we have, and if I flip over to this spreadsheet here that Scott and I work in quite a bit, these are the last 20 to 21 Super Bowls right here. These are your quarterbacks in the Super Bowl. This is their cap hits in that given year. And you'll notice that there are specifically very few high numbers in terms of that NFL cap percentage versus the league cap. The metric we're talking about here. So this is 20 plus years of Super Bowl quarterbacks and the cap percentage that they took during that season to get there. This is the high right here, Peyton Manning, in one of his final seasons with the Colts. If you go through there and we break this down to a median and average situation, it's not very high. All right. I mean, the best I can give you is since 2011, the median's right around 11%. If I take it to 2015 for a little bit more of a recency, it's about 11.5% is the median percentage of cap that a Super Bowl quarterback has taken on in that Super Bowl season. We've had some go north of that, but if you'll look, Matt Ryan and that loss to the Patriots, of course, the memorable loss, that's our kind of anomaly here. Everything else is 13% and under. So when Scott and I speak to this kind of stuff, 13% is kind of our ceiling, because it just doesn't exist on this page. This is not fake. This is real. And it's 20 years. It's a big sample size. So this is generally what happens. Now, there's rookie contracts here. There's restructured contracts here. Basically, every Brady you see is a restructured contract. There's early extensions where the cap hits are low in the first couple of years. Patrick Mahomes, Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers. So there's a variety of ways to get to here. And then there's Matt Stafford last year. And Matt Stafford looks the part, right? About 11% with a $20 million hit last year, even in a year where the cap dropped. But you got to remember, that was a $39 million cap hit before he was traded. In trading Matt Stafford and acquiring Matt Stafford, the Rams dropped him. The Rams acquired a cap hit that was right in line with Super Bowl winning quarterbacks or Super Bowl appearing quarterbacks. That's part of the conversation here. The Rams can't be the Rams if Matt Stafford's sitting on a $40 million cap hit in their window of contention. So if we go back to Deshaun Watson and we kind of, project out that the Browns could be contenders, and if they want to be contenders, they've got to stay within this threshold. I'm going to be generous here for the next couple of windows. And I'm going to say, okay, the cap is rising. We think it's going to balloon a little bit next year. So let's say that 16% becomes the modern bar for a cap hit versus the league cap. Well, obviously, we are well above that right now going forward. And by the way, a quick note, in just my opinion, I totally understand that Deshaun Watson and his agency wanted to drop this figure down to $1 million for suspension purposes, but I think this number is way too low. Number one, the Browns forfeited their first-round pick in this trade. They traded it away, which drops their draft pool considerably. It's down to about $5 million for all of their draft picks this year. That's the cap they have to spend to sign every single one of their draft picks from round 2 to round 7. About $5 million is all it's going to take. They have more money coming off when Austin Hooper's post-June 1st designation hits. They do have some guys they want to bring back, but right now, even with this contract, Deshaun Watson on the books, they're projecting to about $23 million of top 51 cap space. So take off 5, take off a practice squad, take off a bunch of minimum guys to get to 90 for the offseason. Yeah, it's going to add up. But I think they did themselves a disservice by putting this cap hit as low as it was, under 5% of the league cap this year. I think that signing bonus or a roster bonus here that increases the cap, takes some of the cash from future years, and puts it into 2022 when they do have a little bit of wiggle room, I think that would have been a much better approach. That's just my opinion. I completely understand any team wanting to go down as low as possible in the current year and basically saying we're going to figure it out next year as we go, because the NFL has shown time and time again that teams can do this successfully. Just keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. And that's the exercise here, because they didn't do that. They kept it under 5% this year. So now my goal with this next window is I got to get this 24% down into the 16s if I want to have a reasonable chance based on trends, based on 20 years of trends of getting Deshaun Watson and his Browns roster into the Super Bowl. So if I restructure the 2023 salary, what I've done here is I've taken $23 million of it. I've cut it in half. All right, dropped it in half, spread out that over 5 years with a void year added, and I've got us around that 16% mark for the 2023 cap hit. This is going to be the plan for the next couple of windows here, really for the next 3 until I designate that this thing has to be ripped up and started over. And what you're going to see is that's dead cap. That's now dead cap, and that's going to continue to increase and increase and increase as we do these restructures. That's the problem here. So let's continue to move on. Keep in mind, by the way, I don't even have a dead cap column here that's adding up as we go, because everything you see here is fully guaranteed. So there's no out. There's no let's just get out of this thing. Obviously, you can trade him, and if that's the case, you want to limit how much bonus money you have here, because that's going to stay with the Browns in a trade. But from a salary dump standpoint, there is no salary dump to release him at any point in time in this contract. It's fully locked in, guaranteed. All right? So let's go to 2024, because now we've got a percentage of almost 25% for that season. So now we've got to take about $26 million off of that 2024 salary, and you can see we've added another void year, and the restructured dead cap is piling up. All right? Now we're sitting with $15 million after this contract is over. That's got to stay with the Browns, barring a restructure, which we'll get to. But again, we've dropped the cap for obviously this year and the next 2 seasons around that 16% mark, which is high. It's too high based on what trends have said, but I'm allowing for 16% in this exercise because I think it's realistic. 2025 now has a $64.7 million cap hit, so we got to do something about that, because that's almost 26% of the projected cap in 2025. Let's restructure $30 million of that salary. So you can see we're piling up here. We're piling up here. And there's now $33 million of dead cap sitting after the contract expires to the Browns. It's not unheard of. Essentially, the Packers have $76 million after the 3 years of Aaron Rodgers coming up here. So this has happened. It's a trend that we're seeing. Shorter contracts take on the dead cap in the void years. I wouldn't say it's a good process yet, but teams are getting by with it right now. We'll see if there's a breaking point. There hasn't been one yet in the NFL. Pushing it down the line has continued to be successful for some teams, and I think the Browns are in a position now where they have to be one of those teams because of this contract. $70.7 million cap hit in 2026 based on a 260 cap. It's around 27% of their cap. So what do we do with this one? We're in the last year of the contract now, 5 years out. Fully guaranteed here. Loads of dead cap here, all right? 57 and change in dead cap sitting on this contract right now of the 70.7. All right? So we're gonna extend him. He's 31 years old. He's probably 30 going on 31 at the time of signing here. We're going to extend Deshaun Watson into a brand new contract to rip up this last year. Here it is. All right. It's a 4-year, $220 million extension in 2026, which is $55 million per year, which this is just the number I landed on. If we're at 50 now, right? Aaron Rodgers just went 50. It stands to reason that Russell Wilson could do 50 in Denver, either this year or next year. And then we've got Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, other names coming that, maybe Watson's current $46 million per year becomes the bar and we'll leave the 50 alone for now. But for all intents and purposes, Joe Burrow, if he has another year like he just had, maybe not even at the Super Bowl, he's going to be the next man up in this conversation. And it could be as early as 2023 that this happens. So is he going north of 50? Is then Justin Herbert right there with him? Where's Lamar Jackson going to fall in this? Kyler Murray, I mentioned. And then, by the way, at 2026, Josh Allen is up for a new contract based on his guarantee structure. He's in this conversation again. If Buffalo is still in contention, is he in this $50 million plus conversation? So I just think that there's a really good chance 4 years from now that 55 is the next man up situation. So I'm just assuming everything goes swimmingly with Watson and the Browns. They're still in contention. They want to get out of $70 million cap hit, and a 4-year extension is the way they do it. So that's what this looks like. It's a $50 million bonus because obviously we've got to drop that cap hit in 2026. So we went from almost $71 million down to 37 and change, all right, which is around the 14% mark. I went as low as I could go while also keeping other things somewhat tenable. But as you can see in this column here, things are getting pretty crazy. All right, we are approaching 30% of the league cap for one player right now in a 53 to 55 man roster. And that's tough to swallow. It's just not the kind of situation you can get into in a hard cap, you know. And again, we're going to try to push it out here and go as far as we can go. But this is really rough how this works, all right? And by the way, the Saints and Eagles and some of these teams live like this and die like this every single day. So if we continue to go here, we're gonna live with this. We're gonna do something about this in 2027. So it's $42 million of that base salary is now converted to bonus. We've added a void year just like last time. You'll see that's the restructure here, and we've dropped it down to 44.6, which is in our 16% range here. Obviously, I'm not using specifics. I'm using round numbers to make this as easy as possible for everybody. But we've cleared ourselves now through 2027 with manageable cap hits and possibly contendable cap hits. Let's put it that way. Again, though, we're going to do it again in 2028. And this time we're taking $45 million of that salary, adding it to this line of danger here, adding another void year. And we've cleared ourselves down into that 16% range. Our cap hit is $47 million for 2028. It's comfortable. But look what we've done now for the final 2 years of this extension. We are approaching $90 million. All right? We're approaching $90 million. And if we do it one more time and we take $50 million out of 2029, we've now hit almost $93 million cap hit in 2030, when there's supposed to be a league cap of about $300 million based on $10 million increases, which is now over 30%. And if we're assuming that Deshaun Watson remains fully guaranteed because he just did it, so we assume that the new extension would also remain there, then this $55 million is fully guaranteed. So you're either starting over on another extension, something a little bit more tenable, and maybe you can get him to play ball a little bit at this point because he's made tons of money. Let's not forget that, right? That's basically, if this is $266 million total, this is 25 plus 50 plus a gigantic bonus. This is a lot of buco cash here. This is big time cash here. So what we're talking about is $400 million over the next 9 seasons for a player that should be a top 5 quarterback as long as, everything goes as planned and he remains the type of quarterback that he can be. So let's go back real quick, all the way back to the original. So the final comment I want to make on this is, there are certain teams that would do exactly what I just did. Every single year, we're living in the moment. We're living for this year. We think we have a good team. We're going to go. Now, it's unrealistic, by the way, to think that for the next 8 years, the Browns are going to be in contention. That's unrealistic, even if he's the quarterback. It's possible, but it's not something I would assume, which is why you live year to year and you just continue to do what you have to do from a cap perspective. However, everything that I just did would get a hell of a lot easier, markedly easier, if they just leave next year alone. Don't touch it. The Chiefs have just done this with Patrick Mahomes. He had a $28 million bonus-ish, a little under 28, and I was screaming in the microphone, they can't touch it this time. They did it last year. They can't touch this one because things get crazy if they do. And to a point of where, like I just did with this exercise, there's really a point of no return. How far can you go before you just can't do it anymore? And I think we found that point here. So the Chiefs have just essentially said, this is the year we're going to take it. I agree with them because they can lower Tyreek Hill this year. They've lowered Frank Clark this year. They've found ways to secure the roster without touching Patrick Mahomes' contract. these kind of deals, and they're not going away, these kind of deals have to have that come to moment, right? And I think next year, for a couple of reasons, should be Deshaun Watson's. A, they do have the relief this year. If they don't spend it, some of the cap that I've talked about, this Browns team, it's going to roll into next year. So you can say, all right, well, we didn't allocate it in 2022, but we can roll it into 2023. Let's say there's an extra 12 or 13 million. That now makes that $55 million cap hit a little bit more manageable. If we think about it that way, well, we're just pulling it down to 42, 43, which it's high, but not in the grand scheme of things. And then the number 2 point with next year is this right here. All right, we're expecting a $22 million cap jump next year. And I've heard 230 quite a bit because of the TV money coming in. So that is unlike any of these other years. I would expect that it would stay on some sort of $10 million increase from there out. It may jump to 245. It may continue. The money may be so good, the revenues may be so good that 15 becomes our new bar. And then obviously everything here looks better. But just assuming that there's going to be $10 million increases like we've had over the past decade, except for next year, when there's expected to be that big balloon, this is when you should do it. The league is giving you a bit of some leniency in terms of the cap because of that big burst. And this contract should be able to hold right there. All right. I realize 24% is ugly, but doing that helps everything else going forward. And by the way, maybe they figured out that they can live with this and they don't touch too much of this. Maybe they restructure 10 million next year and 10 million that in 2024. And they sort of slow play this process. I'm big on board with that. But at some point in time, and maybe it is next year, by the way. If next year's the year where they say we are 3 pieces away, we need another wide receiver, we need a whatever it's going to be, we need a legitimate edge rusher. We got to go get a guy off a roster who doesn't want to be there anymore. If you need to free it up, obviously it's here to do so. That's why the big base salary rates exist. But at some point in time, and I believe it should be next year, they should just hold court, take on the gigantic cap hit, historic cap hit, and then give themselves a better chance to get through this contract, which is already guaranteed, and give them more control over how they're going to restructure it without having things balloon into the 70s as quickly as possible. That's my take after doing this exercise that, after 8-9 years and a new contract, Cleveland really dug themselves into a hole. And we've seen Detroit do that with Matt Stafford. We've seen, Jared Goff was that situation with the Rams for quite a bit because of the double bonus, which they've now done with Matt Stafford. There's been certain instances, certainly Matt Ryan and 4 restructures, but that's what the hole I don't want them to dig in Cleveland. And I think they have the ability to do that if they just kind of sit still next year, understand what they have to do, and preserve that $55 million, which sounds crazy, but probably the right move. All right, that's your Deshaun Watson contract breakdown. Visit Spotrac.com for plenty more.